Hi, welcome to Blogging Heads TV, Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Meghan Daum. Meghan, could you please introduce yourself?
Hey, Aryeh. Yes, I'm Meghan Daum. I am a writer, essayist, now podcaster, longtime opinion journalist, now retired, emeritus. I'm an opinion haver emeritus.
Right. So we're going to be talking about a piece that you just published in Medium, and the headline is "The Last Think Piece." Subhead: After 25 years, I'm retiring from quote cakes. We'll link to the piece below. You just put it up today, right? This is Thursday the 17th.
I think it went
was
up
it yesterday?
December 16th.
Okay.
So yesterday.
So yeah, so this is breaking news. Although this might not run for a little bit, but so I encourage people to read the piece. And
I think they interrupted a lot of live news broadcasts to let everybody know that I was no longer writing takes.
Right.
So it's breaking.
So okay, people should read it. I enjoyed the piece, and immediately after I read it, I messaged you if you want to talk about it on the show. And so this is going to be I guess this is going to be somewhat of a meta conversation or something, but we're going to try to not offer takes because you're giving up being in the take business. And so I'm not going to try to extract some takes from you, but I did think it was interesting, and the piece resonated with me. And so yeah, so can you just say why you're giving up the racket of writing about your opinions on a regular basis?
The short answer is I don't know what I think about anything anymore a lot of the time. It's funny. You asked me to come on your show a few months ago based on something that I had written, and I can't remember what it was now, but I do remember that the reason that I declined was that it's not that I didn't believe what I had written. I just didn't care enough about it to even talk about it or defend it. And I honestly don't remember what it was about.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now also, but I remember reaching out to you.
It was totally worth the invitation. Yes, it was obviously enough that you thought to have me on.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, so but I do remember thinking that piece was interesting and well written, as all of your pieces are, and there are parts that I remember disagreeing with, but I don't remember exactly what the topic was. But it wasn't pre-pandemic. I mean, the other thing is just like the strange compression and expansion of time during this year, where we're doing the same thing every day. It makes it hard to remember, what exactly things happened. But yeah, you declined. I think you said something like, yeah, you're kind of sick of thinking about these things, and you didn't have anything more to say than what was in the piece. So
yeah, I think it's not really that I am tired of having opinions in and of themselves. I don't feel that I can do them on a set schedule anymore. There's something a little bit curious about just the conceit of the regular columnist. So, for a long time I was writing in the Los Angeles Times weekly. A lot of newspaper columnists write twice a week, even 3 times a week. Right. And it's funny because that's a gig. Everybody wants a steady gig. If you're a writer, whether you're an opinion columnist or a reporter or just any kind of writer, what you want is to get a steady gig so you get a steady check. So that's great. But the other side of that is that you have to just sort of cough things out a lot of the time. So especially if you're an opinion columnist, I found that over 10 years, say, writing the LA Times column, probably would say I had like a really strong column, maybe like 1 out of every 5 times, and like an okay one, 1 out of every, 4 times, 3 times. And then, occasionally you just have like an absolute turd that you had to write. You have to say something. Like right. There will be a hole in the newspaper back when there was actual newspaper that anybody cared about if you don't file something. So you end up sometimes writing things that you don't even really mean. I've never said something that's like the opposite of what I think, but sometimes in order to like end the piece, to sort of have it tie together logically, you have to like have a conclusion that makes rhetorical sense, but it's not necessarily like some earth-shattering insight that you're excited about sharing with the world. And That's just not a good way to live for more than, say, 24 years. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, so some of this maybe is just the kind of burnout that anyone in a career where you're like doing something intensive, over and over again would maybe suffer from. But thinking about it, yeah, I mean, I think I've said before in this show, the online discourse has, is especially obsessed with opinion columns, and especially the New York Times opinion page. And those columnists usually write 2 pieces a week. Sometimes it's just one, but it's almost impossible to write 100 odd 800-word mini essays a year and have them all be good. Like that's virtually impossible. So there's gonna be some clunkers. Like you said, I mean, you were putting your batting average at like somewhere between, I guess, 200 and 333 or something like that.
I'm not good at averages. I'm not going to say that 1 out of every 5 was an absolute turd, but definitely 1 out of every 20 was. I actually thought it might be funny to go back and pull out my worst columns, but like, why do that to yourself?
Right. Yeah. So it seems both like kind of an impossible task, but yeah, like you said, that is. Getting regular comments at one of the remaining major newspapers is like the crown jewel, the triple crown, to continue the batting average metaphor. And especially, and strangely, at the New York Times, it seems to be like a tenured position. Like they give people a column and then they keep on going, even if they've run out of things to say. It's a
lifetime appointment.
Yes, yeah, I don't know why that is exactly, but some of these people, and I'll name names like Meghan Daum or, I mean, well, when's the last time I used to read Gail Collins and laugh? I haven't read Gail Collins in probably a decade. They just keep churning this stuff out. So it is weird. It is weird in that particular instance with the Times that they keep on going no matter what, even if they have nothing left to say. But it is, there aren't a lot of jobs where you have like lifetime tenure. It's like federal court and university professor and
right.
opinion columnist for a major newspaper. So yes, that all makes sense. So I guess the obvious question is, what sort of writing are you going to pursue? Because at the end of your piece it says, this is like your last column. So you're on Medium, which is medium.com, the website, and then a subsection or a imprint within it called Gen.
Yes.
That's what you're writing for, and so you're leaving that post, but
right.
You're staying with Medium, and you're going to be writing about other topics?
Well, so for the last couple of years, I've been writing for Medium's publication Gen. Medium has several sub-publications. One of them is Gen, Gen. And yeah, initially I was writing two pieces a month for them. And I actually did not want to write, we talked about they came to me and they said they do, obviously Medium is complicated because obviously it's many tiers and, anybody can post on Medium and then, but they do have a stable of regular writers that are paid like regular contract writers at any other publication. And so we had negotiated that. And I said at that time, I do not want to write once a week. I want to write every other week a longer piece. Usually they were pretty long, 1,800, 2,000 words, which felt like an incredible luxury because after being a newspaper columnist, having to hit like literally 730 words every week, as you probably know, it's harder to write short than to write long a lot of the time. So, so I was doing twice a month.
There's a famous clip. I can't remember who said it. This would have been shorter if I had more time.
That's right. That's right. Yes. I can knock 3,000 words out in, 45 minutes. So yeah, I was writing for them, and then we took it down to once a month. And again, people are like, "What's your problem? You can't come up with something to write once a month." I mean, I'm being a little hyperbolic here. It's more that I just felt like I have a very high threshold for originality. I don't want to say something if I feel that anybody else has said it. I really want to offer something fresh. I want to be counterintuitive. Like I have certain benchmarks in any given piece that I want to hit. And I felt that just in the digital sort of journalism economy, the metabolism of production is such that it's very, very hard to say something original. And it was just becoming less interesting to me. I didn't feel that I was really contributing on the level that I want to contribute. And also, it's just like I said in the beginning, we have there's just such a, I don't even know what the word is. It's like a mosh pit of information that we're subsumed in. Mm-hmm. That I honestly, I have a very hard time parsing it, and I don't know what my opinions are anymore a lot of the time. So mm-hmm. I felt like to be intellectually honest was almost like gaslighting myself in a certain way.
Okay, but you're avoiding the question, which is what are you going what sort of thing are you going to be writing in the future?
Look, I'm going to still be, so I'm not doing these columns for Medium's Gen magazine anymore, but they do have this sort of new stable of bloggers, and I'm going to be one of those. Susan Orlean is one, Ashley Ford, Alexander Chi, like really, really great writers. So I get to just do little, I can kind of just ruminate on whatever I want once or twice a week, but I'm sure that the occasional opinion will slip in there. What I'm not going to do really is write the think piece.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I can't possibly not have an opinion. I mean, that would be hard for me.
So I'm thinking of that. I don't think they run them anymore, but there used to be this guy, Verlin Klinkenborg, who wrote these kind of like rural life pieces for the Times.
Fantastic. And a great novelist too.
I never read him beyond this was in the pre-internet era. I remember, like, this was when I was in high school. I was reading these pieces, and you'd be like looking at a bird. He was right about that. They were like lovely little things. I don't know exactly why they paid him to do this. I guess he was on the editorial board anyway, and he lived like in some rural area, and he would just do these little kind of dispatches. And so maybe I don't know if
that was diversity and inclusion back then. We have a guy on a farm,
right? Exactly. Yeah, and that was probably more, well, I don't know, that was more when the Times was somewhat less of a national paper in the sense that, like, everyone in the country was reading it every day, everyone, quote unquote. But yeah, so maybe, well, yeah. I hope you pursue what your, where the muse takes you.
I'm going to be, yes. Look, I don't have any other skills, so I have to write. Don't worry. I know people are terrified. They might never hear another word from me.
Okay, I wanted to ask, okay, so part of this is like, so you once wrote for the LA Times, and at that time, so this was like around 2000 or so when you were writing for them?
I wrote for them from 2005 to 2015, 16, basically.
So that's sort of beginning of the social media era to 5 or so years ago. So, and, so it once was limited real estate, like getting that stuff. Like literally, there's only so much space in the paper. And then this stuff moved online, so there's more. But now it's infinite, and Medium is part of that, because Medium, in its original iteration, was the place where you could anyone could publish something, and it looked really good because they had this great graphic design, a very easy user interface and stuff. And so there's pieces that I've written, fewer than 5 pieces over the past 5 years, that I put on Medium when I tried to like sell it to Slate or something, and they didn't want it. So I was like, I'll just put it on Medium because it looks nice. So in a way, Medium is like sort of part of the problem of like the takeification of online discourse, because it lets any moron like me write something and it looks semi-official because it's on Medium and it has nice graphic design.
It has nice font
and stuff. Yes. Yeah, it's a great font.
Yeah.
So it's not just a blog or something, which was the like previous iteration of that. And then, but it's interesting that I think Medium started off as just a platform, but then it moved into content, and it's somewhere in between. And like that, and other sites like YouTube has done that also. Like YouTube makes its own original content, but it's still primarily a platform that almost anyone can use. But then other things like, I guess maybe Facebook is trying to do some original content, but I don't think that's been a success.
Really?
I think they've tried doing some shows type things with like influencers, but no one really has watched it. And then Twitter has not embraced original content. As far as I know, Twitter's not paying anyone to tweet. That's still like the bargain basement of where anyone can get in the muck and play around there. But it is kind of like, I mean, that's the sort of thing, is that anyone can get on Twitter, and really, unless you're doing something really insane, like they will let you stay on there and keep on putting out whatever you want, and you can disseminate your opinion far and wide, and that was impossible 20 years ago. So I'm interested in sort of like the material conditions, sort of technological aspect of this, as well.
Right.
If you have
Well,
any thoughts
and
on
I
that.
just want to be clear. So the writers who write for Medium in the capacity that I have been, we have editors, we get copy editing. Like, it's a professional deal. It functions like any other magazine. So, and I had really terrific editors there. So, it's not, yeah, just to be clear, I wasn't just like throwing my stuff up there.
Right. So you were being paid.
As much as I would love to.
So you're being paid. The things I put on Medium, no one paid me for. It was just like,
yeah,
just we're putting it up there.
The funny thing about Twitter is, up until recently, I had this theory that Twitter was kind of saving opinion writers from themselves, because, or any writer, like if you had an idea and you wanted to just get it out of your system, or like a funny line or some, just little conceit or theory, you could just tweet it, and then you've said it, and like you don't have to write a whole piece about it. Like all these kinds of germs of ideas that it used to be like, oh, I want to say this, and then you end up like trying to get 1,000 words out of it or something. You could just tweet it and get it out of your system. But now I feel like there's such an insatiable hunger for takes that aren't just tweets, that are functioning as opinion pieces or columns on digital platforms, that people are forced to turn these things into little think pieces and kind of make a tiny little idea, just stretch it out into something that is supposed to be like an interesting or relevant story. And that's a tyranny. And it's really an economic issue. I mean, I as much as I can't stand getting old, I'm so grateful to be the age that I am, because I came of age as a writer before you were expected to just like churn out 3 takes a day and get paid like less than minimum wage for it. It's really, really difficult. So a lot of it, I just think that it's just so clogged. We're just so clogged with information and with opinions and articles. It's very hard to get heard. And the problem is that the only way to really have your piece get heard in any way is to say something outrageous. Right. And then you've said something outrageous that you probably don't mean, unless you're a sociopath. And then you've set yourself up for just saying stuff that you can't really stand by in order to stay relevant. And that's like a disastrous recipe.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, something interesting that has happened this year in media is people moving to Substack. And so Twitter like was one of the main culprits in killing the blogosphere. And because there's just so much more, your thing could go viral so much more easily. It was more entertaining. It was more like gamified in a way that got people addicted to it, etc. And so most of the, the heyday of political blogs, that also like that period of mid-aughts, like that led to the creation of blogging heads, like that is almost entirely gone. And a lot of those people moved to Twitter, and then some of those people got sick of Twitter, like mostly rightfully so, and those people are now like moving to Substack, and Substack in some way is like recapitulating the blogosphere of 10-15 years ago, with figures like Glenn Greenwald, Andrew Sullivan, Matthew Iglesias, who were really great at being bloggers, and then they moved to other places, more mainstream things, or Glenn Greenwald founded The Intercept and then left in a huff a couple months ago. But anyway, it was just weird that both that this is happening, and also like it kind of took so long for some viable or possibly viable business model to be created by like one company that made it so that people who were bloggers 15 years ago could like now get paid something for doing what's essentially a blog, except it ends up in your email instead of like you needing to go out and find it.
Yes. I subscribe to a number of Substacks. I like reading them. I think, it's something I might do in the future. Right now, like I said, I kind of just don't have the energy to write, long pieces and that I feel like I could serve my readers. One thing I am doing, I started a podcast. I mean, really, what is interesting me these days is talking to other people. So I started a podcast. It's called the Unspeakable podcast. one of my books is called The Unspeakable, not the most recent one, but a couple before that. And, it's an interview show. I talk to interesting people about, topics that I guess are now considered taboo, even though they would have been completely anodyne 5 minutes ago. And I just want to have thoughtful, nuanced conversations with honest people. And I started it late last summer, and it's fantastic. I really love doing it. I love finding the guests. I love, getting ready to talk to them and talking to them and really sort of thinking about how conversations can be productive and surprising and respectful. And so I really want to hear other people talk for a while and less of myself talking. So that's what's really most exciting to me at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And as someone who's been doing a podcast for about 5 years now, it's more fun, I think, than writing pieces. Writing a piece, I don't know, it's a lot. For me, at least. I mean, maybe you can turn out 3,000 words in 45 minutes. I'm a much slower writer, but
they're really, really good. Yeah,
but
I can't actually.
But yeah, and also playing the role of the interlocutor or interviewer is more. I think it's more so to my skills, at least, than being the pontificator. And part of that, so you kind of also mentioned about like feeling like you're less sure about things than you once were, and so you didn't want to be the person handing down the words of wisdom or something like that. And that resonated with me also, and especially things I've been thinking about in terms of like both the rise and fall of Donald Trump and how crazy the world has gotten the past couple of years, and like things in my personal life, like getting divorced, and kind of throwing up my hands, being like, why are these things happening? I don't know. And so yeah, I'm in no position to like offer the definitive take on something, so I'm much more comfortable asking questions, I think. And you kind of half-jokingly talk about this in the piece about how annoying it is to be married to someone who is producing 2 op-eds per week, because you're like constantly, the writer, are constantly looking for content and worrying about everything.
Oh, it's annoying for the other person. Yes. Right. Yeah. It's annoying for anybody. Like if you are, whether it's your partner, like the person you live with, whether it's your best friend, whether it's like any given family member, anybody that you're with, routinely, they have to just kind of put up with the fact that you're constantly mining your world for potential material. All writers do that to some degree, of course. But if you are on a schedule and you have to come up with something, not only are you constantly looking for material, you're just constantly panicked. It's like, I think, David Brooks, I think, said this. It's like having a term paper due every day. And the material issue aside, the issue of subject matter and content aside, just having that kind of pressure on you, you can't enjoy life. You can't enjoy anything. And so it's very tempting to say, if your spouse says, well, let's go to a movie this weekend, and like, no, I can't. Like, my piece is due Monday. How dare you? You know that I can't do anything. And so people learn to say like, oh, well, you could write about the film that we see, and, you can get it, do it this way, or, you're refusing to go on vacation, but consider all the potential columns you could get out of, this particular trip. But then you end up just like not enjoying the trip and, holding up in the hotel room the whole time, trying to write the columns. I mean, like a lot of people too also don't realize that unless you have a really cushy deal, most of us only get paid when we file. So I could take a week off, but then I would lose a week's payment. So it's really kind of hand to mouth thing, as well as being on a treadmill.
Right.
But I wanted to get back to something that you mentioned earlier, which is, this idea of I don't know what to think anymore.
Right.
I've always taken an approach to my essays and to my nonfiction where I'm really inviting the reader to think alongside me as I sort through my thoughts. I was never really interested in being the kind of columnist, or certainly not the kind of essayist that says, like, this is what I think, this is what the truth is. I'm going to take you from, A to Z, and by the end of this piece, you're going to completely be on my side. It's a suggestion. I'm inviting you to consider something. And I just think that the bandwidth for that kind of consideration is significantly narrower than it has been in the past. There isn't a lot of tolerance for it, or even really ability to process it. So if you could write a piece like that and people are like, whoa, what are you saying? You're not, the best case scenario is they don't know what you're saying. And worst case scenario is that they just project the worst possible thing onto what they read and make all sorts of, assumptions that aren't there. So unless you are absolutely crystal clear with your quote unquote take, you are vulnerable to willful misconstrual.
Yeah.
And that's no fun.
Yeah, wasn't the title of the piece that we talked about that you wrote about the intellectual dark web wasn't it Nuance, a Love Story?
Yes.
So that was
from a few years ago, right?
Yeah, so that Nuance doesn't play on social media. Strong like emotional reaction and like heightened exaggeration and things like that. Those are the things that go viral, and it doesn't. I've noticed this. It works in any sphere. If you see all these weird things that bubble up on Twitter about like fans of like fantasy shows on the CW or something, it's like the things that go viral are when people are like, "This is the worst episode ever," or like, "He is the best actor in the history." So like, just that is what people retweet, is when it's like highly charged content.
Yeah, that's the currency.
Yeah.
So, although there is nuanced Twitter, have you noticed this? I feel like this is like a new subcategory. Like all these people follow me, they have handles like nuance needed and like, Mr. Nuanced.
That's interesting. I mean,
nuanced AF,
Well, God bless them, but I just think the medium is not there. Like like the way it works is anti-nuance. Right. I mean, it's a limited set of characters, and there's some people who do these like Twitter essays and stuff. Some of them work, some of them don't. But it really is for it wasn't built for this, but the things that thrive within that ecosystem are like either person X is the best, person X is the worst. Look at what a moron this person on the other side is.
Garbage. Here's garbage versus non-garbage. Yes.
Right. So yeah. So there's that. But then I'm thinking also about the line from Shakespeare: the fool does think he is wise, but the wise man knows he is a fool. And just like so many people have moral certainty or sure that they're right, and it goes from President Trump on down, who is the smartest, the best brain, the best genes. Like I alone can fix it, he said at his acceptance speech in 2016, and like he portrayed himself as he's the best at everything. When not obviously, but when in reality he's just a moron. And so
but he's great at Twitter.
Yeah, and there's a connection there. Like that is one of his skills, is Twitter, and it helped launch his political career. And yeah, there's no shortage of like people who think they know exactly what the answer is to anything, and then like getting older in life, I'm more likely than I was 10 years ago to just throw up my hands and say I don't know the answer to this thing. But yeah, who's going to retweet something? If I said I don't know this, why would anyone retweet that? Because that's like almost nothing.
Yeah,
so that doesn't get me any clout that I don't know about something.
I mean, but the best writing, the best literature is about being conflicted, right? I mean, by definition. I always say, I think I said this in my last book, and I say this to my students, like, if you're not conflicted, you're either lying to yourself or you're not very smart.
Well, maybe that's one of the reasons that YA literature has grown in popularity over the past couple decades, because, there's not a lot of moral uncertainty in Harry Potter. Like, there's Voldemort, and he is the worst person in the world, such that you can even say his name. And then there's Harry and his friends, and they're the best, and they're like the greatest friends ever, and blah, blah, blah. So that sort of, very simplistic stuff about
actually, you're right. Actually,
heroes and villains and quests and stuff like that. Like people eat that shit up.
Yeah, right. And so that sort of, I haven't read YA since like Judy Blume back in the day, but
which is probably more morally complex than the stuff that is.
well, I actually have my
today.
theories about Judy Blume. I have, this is a different conversation, but I'm like a little anti Judy Blume.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's a precursor to women's magazines. She said it like, your life is a problem. Your life is a problem. Puberty has hereby rendered your entire life a problem. And then you grow out of that, and then you start reading like 17 magazine. And then Glamour and all these things to like sell you the solutions. Judy Blume is a conspirator with women's magazines.
Okay, I'll have to think about that. I haven't reread any Judy Blume since I was a child. Did she write Ramona Quimby? Is that Judy Blume or is that someone else?
No, that's Beverly Cleary, who's fantastic. That's a totally different thing.
Okay, maybe I'm conflating the two. Dear Mr. Henshaw, that would be Beverly Cleary.
This is such a great piece. Oh my God, this is a great piece. I can't write it now.
Oh yeah, you
in my old iteration, I would have been like, I'm going to write a think piece about my Judy Blume.
Yeah, I mean that's like a Slate pitch if I've ever heard it. But yeah, unfortunately, you've officially retired from the ring, and someone else will have to pick up the baton there to mix my sports metaphors. But yeah, just the idea that, I mean, I remember I had a professor in college, and it was a professor of Russian literature, and at one point he said something like that, the great novels don't like give an answer, they ask a question, and I think he was talking about Anna Karenina. And so that's a different world from like the social media world, in like a dozen ways. But the just like if when you finish Anna Karenina, you're not ready to tweet like oh, Vronsky was that fucker, like screw him, drag his ass to hell, or something like that. You're kind of just like, you're not sure. So that is well,
right, but we just had the controversy in YA about the author who was defending classic literature got completely dragged to hell and not even back.
I mean, that's part of it. It's not, so I mean, that whole thing was funny, especially the guy who wrote about like you disgusting worms. In that tweet that went viral, and that whole episode is strange. In the YA world is very strange, explored by the people, the two hosts of Feminine Chaos, formerly on Blogging Heads, very deeply. But yeah, part of it is like the simple stories in which there's like a hero and a villain, and somehow we got to the point thinking that like a teenager needs to read a story in which the hero like triumphs and the villain is defeated, or else they'll like become a villain themselves or something. It's right. I don't know, it's stupid.
Right.
So yeah, it's very
right.
anti-literary.
So the sensibility of YA has really like crept into everything else, and it's this very black and white thinking. Yeah, that's true. So maybe I should write YA.
Well, I wonder if there's some counter narrative, brewing within YA or something for more, focusing on moral complexity or something. But I don't know, maybe that wouldn't sell.
The intellectual dark web YA division.
Yeah, although I wouldn't want to read, Eric Weinstein's young adult novel. I would pass on that one. But
I don't know. It could be like a series, like I would like Camille Paglia to do a YA series.
This sounds more like sort of a New Yorker humor piece idea than than something that could actually succeed in the marketplace. So I'm thinking of
the old New Yorker humor piece. Yeah, I don't know now.
Did you oh, if you don't read YA, you probably don't read this. Did you ever read the Golden Compass books? There've been multiple adaptations, one in HBO since then. I'm forgetting the author's name, but it's kind of I'd have to reread it to think about moral complexity, but it was, in some ways, it was written as a sort of like atheist response to the Narnia books, where instead of like at the end you realize that Aslan is Jesus, like at the end you like God is presented as this sort of like mummified man inside a glass box, and they open the box and he like dissolves into dust. But there is some moral complexity in those books that go beyond the sort of like Harry Potter good versus evil stuff.
But how long ago were they written? Not that this conversation needs to get derailed.
I think late 90s. I think there's only 3 of them, although maybe a 4th one came out within the past couple of years. I only read the first 3. I think late 90s to early 2000s is when they came out.
Well, I mean, look, Madeleine L'Engle. There's a rich tradition of young adult literature, and it used to be like real literature. Anyway, we don't need to get off on that.
Yeah, then we're moving towards having takes on things, which is we want to avoid. So, yeah, I guess I would think like what is the you know, where is the market going, and what do people want? So I've been saying for a while on the show that, you know, Joe Biden was going to win because people were sick of Trump and the craziness, and they want just kind of like return to normalcy, boring. And Trump being the president made everything like seem super high stakes all the time, and everyone was super morally righteous about their own side, some with good reason and some maybe with not. But yeah, like everything was hypercharged. Everything seemed like a massive battle of good versus evil. Like people in the resistance, like, you know, that's the resistance is either fighting the Nazis or fighting, you know, the Star Wars Galactic Empire or something. So we're moving into Biden, and I've actually been joking on Twitter that like things that have been popping up over the past just couple weeks kind of show like maybe we're reverting to more like a 2010 era discourse. The thing about Dr. Jill Biden's doctorate, this is like blogosphere bullshit. And like,
well, I had a lot to say about that.
Well, I didn't read that piece, but I'll just say the fact that people are still talking about this like a week later is incredible to me. When the life under Trump was something crazy happening, a new crazy thing would happen every 36 hours.
Right.
And then you would forget the previous things. The fact that people are talking about Dr. Jill Biden's doctorate is like, we're back, like, this is, you know, I'm like nostalgic.
Back. Are you happy? Like, does it feel good?
Well, almost, I'm just laughing at it, but I'm almost like, it just seems like such utter nonsense that who cares? We're not fighting about coronavirus. We're not fighting about, you know, whether there's a secret cabal of cannibalistic Democrats who are consuming children, or we're not fighting about actual children, you know, migrant children from Central America being in cages. We're fighting about something that really doesn't matter, like, to anyone aside from like.
But it's interesting though, because that controversy arose from somebody on the right. So it was a Wall Street Journal editorial by Joseph Epstein. I have a little skin in this game because I got massively pilloried on Twitter last spring because I made a joke about Dr. Jill Biden. And it was the worst Twitter dragging of my entire life. I've had a couple bad ones, and this was by far the worst. Uh-huh. And I just made this off the cuff comment, like, you know, I know it's shocking. It was off the cuff. It was a tweet. I said, I was seeing Dr. Ford was trending, something having to do with Christine Blasey Ford. Mm-hmm. And I had always had sort of complicated feelings about the fact that they just constantly called her Dr. Ford, Dr. Ford, Dr. Ford. I felt that it was like a strategy to enhance her credibility, mm-hmm. but I also felt like it was sort of overkill and overcompensation that ultimately kind of diminished her story. Like, she should have just been taken seriously as a human being, and I don't think they had to like put this doctor finesse on it. Anyway, it wasn't that they couldn't have, obviously they should have addressed her that way, but I felt that there was like this gratuitous repeating of Dr. Ford, Dr. Ford. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I didn't articulate that in one tweet. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah,
so I just kind of
said,
seeing Dr. Ford trending reminds me of how much I hate it when PhDs insist on being called doctor. And I thought it was fine because most of the PhD holders I know like roll their eyes at people who just throw that honorific around, and it's considered kind of like Arabiste. Mm-hmm. So I tweeted that, and as these things, you know, it sat there for a few days totally fine, and people even liked it, and people with PhDs were like, ha ha ha, so true. And then somebody got a hold of it, and it was like disaster. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of people with PhDs just came after me. Uh-huh. And then it kind of became this racial thing, like, because there's this was something I hadn't thought about. People of color who have PhDs, there's a sometimes feels more urgent to use the honorific for various reasons, which are understandable. Anyway, that I went through that, and I ended up writing this elaborate tweet thread that took me easily as much time as it would have taken me to write a column, explaining all of this. And of course, nobody read it. It got like 15 likes or something after my initial tweet. It's been retweeted thousands of times. Right. So then when the Epstein piece popped up last weekend, I thought, oh no, Well, I noticed that before I noticed his piece, I was noticing that my old tweet was circulating again. I said, "What's happened? What? Oh my gosh, it's back!" And it was about this piece, and I thought, "Oh no, this guy, what is he saying?" And it was one of those op-eds that is like not the 1 out of 5 that's really good. That's an example. I don't know how often Joseph Epstein writes columns for the Wall Street Journal. He's 83 years old.
Yeah,
So.
Based on his age, I don't think he's super active. He's certainly not on Twitter. And yeah, I mean, that piece was almost like a trolley hate read sort of thing to begin with. I don't know.
Although he was making valid points. Actually, he wasn't wrong. Now I'm going to get in trouble again. It was a really rude piece. Yeah.
Or do we grandfather? You wrote about this, so it's grandfathered into the. It's an old opinion. It's not a new opinion.
No. He was actually trying to make a point about how a lot of PhD programs they're giving out too many PhDs. Like the market is glutted,
right? And
this does affect sort of higher education more broadly. And there are a lot of sort of charlatans out there calling themselves doctor. Like, he was making what could have been a valid and interesting point. It's just that he couched it in this inflammatory language that completely overwhelmed any point he was trying to make. But, there's an example. I don't think there would have been any way to write that column and pull it off. So I ended up writing a piece. So I'm blogging. I'm blogging for Medium now. And so one of my blog posts was about this experience of getting dragged by the PhDs and how I was cursing Joseph Epstein for dragging me back into dragging my tweet back to the surface. But at the same time, I felt sorry for him. But that's the kind of piece. I'd say that, like, in 2006, 2007, 2008, I would have written a column about Dr. Jill Biden. That kind of phenomenon is something I would have taken on, and I think it would have been okay. I had editors that would have saved me from myself. I would have stated it as carefully as possible. And I have to say, before Twitter, I think a column like that would have been fine. I wrote columns about things I can't believe that I got away with them. I mean, I wrote a column in like 2008 comparing Barack Obama to an Eames chair and Hillary Clinton to an old sofa. And it was complimentary of Clinton. It was pro Clinton. And it was fine. I got no blowback.
But here's the thing. I mean, the mechanism for blowback didn't exist in the same way it does now. So in 2008, there probably were comments on.
Yeah, but the comments weren't that mean. I think because you know what too. Like, I think.
But there weren't, like, on Twitter you can do like a drive-by thing where you can slam someone in like 15 seconds, and you don't even need to have like read beyond the headline, and then you do your tweet, like, quote tweet slam on it, and then you move on. And
right.
And like that is what Twitter is for. Like, there's obviously anyone who has written or posted a video, for example, has noticed that people often just comment without, they just read the title anyway, so that happens. But like, like 30 years ago in the pre-internet era, it was letter to the editor or talking among friends. Those are the only two ways you could give feedback on a bad column in whatever. And so it's just, the masses are pouring in, and so everyone can have a voice. And actually, I want to run this by you. I've mentioned this in a couple other episodes, and I haven't. I'm like I said, I cannot write 3,000 words in 45 minutes, so I haven't put this to paper. But in some ways, there's been all this debate about free speech and no platforming and all this stuff over the past couple of years. And I've been thinking, maybe the problem isn't limits on speech. It's really there's too much speech. Too many people are talking constantly, and they're all offering their takes. And you don't need to be a credentialed person at the LA Times offer a take. Any moron can do it on social media, and so there's like this cacophony. And it used to be hard to, if you wanted to write a letter to the editor, you had, like 50 years ago, you had to have like a typewriter, or you're writing it by hand. and then you needed to go to the post office and have a stamp. Whereas now it's just an email. So it's just easier there's so much more speech now than there used to be. And when there's some sort of like pile-on or gang up, like that is speech. Like it's more people chiming in a way that was impossible 20 years ago. But that's like the utopia vision of the internet was like, oh, everyone will like speak their piece and we'll all like learn from each other. But that didn't work out. It's everyone ganging up and being in tribes. And yeah, so do you buy this, that there's just too many people talking and more people like need to shut up? I mean, you kind of are shutting up in a way right now.
Completely. I mean, I talk about this in my book, in The Problem with Everything. I think a lot of the problem is that we are just hearing about everything, not just opinion pieces and people's responding to them, or somebody's responding to somebody's video on social media. Like, we're getting every single thing that happens to anybody is something that we could know about. People think that we've never lived in a more dangerous time for certain groups. You would think that police violence has never been worse. Well, that's patently untrue. But the fact is that every single terrible incident that happens regarding a police shooting, just to cite one example, there's a video of it, and we hear about it.
Right. So obviously
there's not always a video of it, but there often is.
Yeah, because
and so we just think that we're living in this terrible, terrible time. And so I think that gets into like, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think because the logical side of my brain can look at the data and see, there were this many unarmed Black men killed last year. And it's like a number so low that it doesn't line up to any of the sort of ambient kind of information that we're receiving. So you can look at that and say, oh, well, why that number is one thing, and yet the perception is something else. And the perception is really the main story. It's, I call it ambient perception. Mm-hmm. And that is like the sum total of all of this information that we're receiving all the time. Everybody's little light is shining, and it's blinding. And it used to be that if something happened to you just in your lived experience, quote unquote, you would like get together with your friends and talk about it. Like if you're a young woman and some guy like yells at you on the street or is rude to you or is sexist to you or mansplains or whatever, you would go and complain about it with your friends over drinks or whatever, and then move on.
Right.
But the fact that you now have the opportunity to write about it on Tumblr if it was 10 years ago, or tweet about it now, it then just becomes like a public act, and it becomes part of a larger zeitgeist when it really should just be part of your personal quotidian life.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to go too far with this because like the police example is good because, 30 years ago, more or less the police had total impunity in any like specific instance, and their version of events would almost certainly carry the day either in the public narrative or in court. And because, it would be he said or something, and who are you going to believe? The cops are this no good criminal type. And so if, if the smartphone didn't exist, then like, the video of George Floyd being killed by the cop would have existed, and the cops would have just said like, this guy had a heart attack or something, or he was on drugs and he collapsed and we did everything we could. And so it's good that, the system, that the cops just can't get away with that kind of stuff that they used to be able to do. But also it is bad. Yeah, because you're right, because there is less police violence than there was 30 years ago, but now we can see it, and there's less. I mean, I've mentioned this on the show before when I had Robbie Suave on about his book, but there was this incident that happened at Yale where a student was yelling at Nicholas Christakis, who was a professor there, and this incident, if it had happened when I was a student there, would not have made it into the Yale Daily News because someone yelling at someone else is not a news story, even in a college newspaper. So it would have been easily forgotten, and maybe there would have been some hurt feelings, like with the central protagonist.
It's just like a little thing that happens in a crowd. It's a little eruption. Yeah,
people yelling at each other is not news. But because there was video and because it was very dramatic and very heightened, and this young woman was very emotional, and she was black and he's white and she's young and he's old, and they're in this beautiful I-League quad and stuff. It went viral, and that is probably a bad thing, like overall for the world, that something like that could happen, and instead of it just being forgotten the next day.
And it makes it impossible to process the experience in any kind of like intellectually or cognitively authentic or ordered way. Like that you have the experience and it immediately goes to the crowd for their metabolization, you know, like it's not, you're not even giving yourself the gift of your own experience. You're just like immediately putting it, you know, just throwing it out there. And I just think like, if you can't kind of sit with what just happened to you, or just sit with your thoughts, you're not able to like be a thinking person in the world. So we just have that kind of scenario writ large, the same way that you can't do a piece of writing anymore without it immediately being reacted to by everybody publicly. It used to be that you would sit with the piece and think about it, and then, like you said, if you were still angry about it, you'd write a letter to the editor, and
right. Or but the flip side of that is like, if there's no immediate reaction to a piece, then it sinks back under the waves because there's 10,000 more pieces or takes or videos or tweets or something competing with it at every moment for the eyeballs or whatever. So that gives the incentive for a piece that's going to provoke an emotional reaction, like calling Joe Biden kiddo or something. So that little part,
he should have called her whippersnapper. That's what I think.
That line probably would have been cut by an editor 20 years ago, and maybe I don't know if it was conscious or not.
I don't think there was an editor. I would be curious. Like I don't think a lot of these columnists, I don't know about the Epstein piece, I have no idea, but I get the sense that a lot of these columnists are not. They have to work so quickly. I don't think they get edited very heavily.
Yeah, I don't know. Inside Wall Street Journal opinion, I'm not quite sure what goes on in there, and they're probably not thinking about the the greater public good or something when they're deciding what to put there. But yeah,
I'd also like to know, when did the word take hold? The idea of the take.
It seems like a blog era word to me, but I guess I'm not exactly sure. We should get the OED people in here,
because I've seen people on Twitter, like I've seen somebody will tweet something and it's just an observation. It's like, I'm looking out at the snow right now, like, the snow has a certain quality to it, and it reminds me of something, and then the reaction will be like, bad take.
Right. Well, I've thought about that too, and part of the like insanity of social media is sort of like everything sort of looks the same and is all mixed up. So you have someone saying, "Oh, the snow outside is pretty," and then you have Donald Trump saying, "I am pardoning, General Flynn," right. And these are right next to each other, and they look the same font and everything. And so it's like, it reminds me of that within the context of No Context essay book by Georgia Trobot,
yes,
which I don't even really remember what it's about, but I did read it at one point in my life.
I don't think he knew what it was about when he was writing it, but that's
it's like context collapse, and everything is mixed up and kind of the same, and a photo of a puppy, and then someone announcing their father died. Like it's all mixed up, and how can this not like make us go insane?
Yeah, and that's what sort of postmodernism was. Like that used to be when people would talk about what is postmodernism, and now
it's hypercharged. I mean, when like, what's that guy's name? Mark Lehner. I think has a new novel coming out, but he was like that stuff, and like they were reacting to like just like cable TV, the fact that there were like 50 channels or something, and flipping through that and like seeing all that stuff, and now I mean it's hypercharged. It's 10,000 times what it was back then when people first like kind of analyzing this stuff.
I know, it's quaint. People used to get freaked out about MTV. Right. Like in my time, when I was a teenager, that was like, I was like, oh my gosh, no, music is dead. Nobody can hear music anymore. You never listen to the song. You're just watching the video.
Whereas now, I mean, this is even like, I'm nostalgic for first making this complaint that MTV doesn't play music videos anymore. Like, there's probably kids growing up today who are like, MTV, like, that, they played videos? Like, what? That doesn't even make any sense to me. They stopped playing videos 20 years ago. So things are moving very fast. But do you, since you're putting aside this one form of being like a opinion columnist and embracing a different form, I guess an older form blog, like, are you optimistic? Are there signs for signs for hope, or like is the system that Silicon Valley and the media has created like going to just keep on encouraging this sort of insanity?
I think yes, and so I think that there isn't much hope in terms of the economic model, but I do think that people are really, really sick of the way things are now. And they have been sick of it for a long time. I mean, I started noticing this 5 or 6 years ago. This isn't really that new. I mean, people were really fed up with kind of, weaponized identity politics online. And I say weaponized identity politics because I don't think all identity politics is bad. Like, I'm not somebody who throws around that term. But there was real resistance in some corners to this kind of stuff, even 5 or 6 years ago. And now I think that the level of being fed up with the hyperbole and this kind of flattened discourse, more people hate that than don't hate it. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, everyone's, we're talking about the sort of capture of big institutions with, what is called wokeness. Again, I don't throw that term around either, but the fact is that it's a very small group of people that truly embrace this kind of discourse and this kind of like misapplied intersectionality. And most people do want to have nuanced TM. Nuanced is, I feel embarrassed using all these words, like nuanced. I feel like nuanced. They really do want to have long, complicated conversations. There's a reason that people will sit there and listen to Joe Rogan for 3 hours. There's a reason that all these podcasts are so popular and they keep popping up. I mean, definitely it's oversaturated, but people are insatiable. There is an insatiable appetite for this. I mean, I hear from people all the time, just doing my podcast, they say, thank you for having these conversations. And these are the kinds of conversations I used to have with my friends that we don't anymore for some reason. And so that's replaced it. So I guess my hope is that there will be more and more of that. The problem is it just gets siloed. That's the thing. It's like a Faustian bargain, because the answer to people not liking the discourse is to create their own little discourses, but then it gets more and more thinly sliced. So
yeah,
we may just have to accept that we're never going to go back to having 3 networks and Walter Cronkite telling us what the news is. It is going to turn, it is like, here's what we want you to believe today.
Yeah. So, and there's an economic incentive with Substack and Patreon to sort of attract a core group of true believer types. And you only need 1,000 or so to pay $5 a month. And then, that's an okay middle class living. So that's committed fans who agree with you. So in some ways you're creating your own echo chamber. Yeah. So podcasts, I'm interested in sort of economic and technological determinism and just the way that a tweet works, the way that a podcast works. You can't just, a podcast can't just be 240 characters, because then it's 4 seconds long and no one wants to download that. So the format encourages these long conversations of the Joe Rogan type or the blogging his type. And then whereas a tweet, it's short, acerbic, sharp, right, emotional. The technology encourages that. So I don't know. But it is, like I said, even if you take politics and identity politics and wokeness and intersectionality totally out of it and just look at the people who are tweeting about their favorite cartoons, they are still, the form encourages this crazy way of being I would die for She-Ra, the She-Ra cartoon or something, or some character on the She-Ra cartoon, or a imagined bisexual relationship between 2 characters on the She-Ra cartoon. The format just seems to bring forth this type of, rhetoric or something, and people either are really invested in it or they pretend to be really invested in it because it gets retweets. And I don't know. So that's where I kind of throw up my hands. And I don't know, maybe Jack Dorsey will shut down Twitter and release us all from the captivity of
I don't know,
that.
Maybe, remember the simplicity movement? That was a big thing. And then in the 90s, and it was all a kind of, fetishizing leaving the big city and, having some kind of permaculture set up or just kind of like, or, Real Simple magazine emerged from this. Like, here's your, buy this $800 wastebasket. I actually wrote a novel, sort of spoofing the simplicity movement in part. So that was a thing. So sometimes I wonder if we're due for like an intellectual simplicity movement.
That's interesting to think about, but you're not allowed to write a tape.
Print newspaper, like it'll be cool. It's like analog, it's like vinyl. Like you're like the hipster thing will be to like read the newspaper in print and not be on social media.
Yes. Okay. I can see that, and I know that there is some sort of revival of actual physical zines that people are producing and mailing out.
Oh, and there's Weaselteer's journal, Liberties. That's pretty much not online.
Yeah, that's like a throwback to like 2 generations ago of media. So yeah, that's possible. I don't know. We'll have to see. You're
not gonna invest in that concept.
Well, I mean, I like there is a pleasure in like having a physical newspaper and looking at it, but then again, there's a reason. Like there's a lot of economic and technological reasons that is a dying way of doing things. So
I think people will be, especially after the pandemic, but just more generally, I think people are going to be wanting to get together and have in-person conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, we already were seeing that. Stage events, people will come out and sit in auditoriums and watch people talk to each other on a stage.
Yes.
And I think that suggests that there's real interest in that. And I think you could even take that to another level, like just people getting together, sort of like maybe salons or some kind of, if there was like an organized forum for discussion, I think that would be something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And paying $35 to go see Pod Save America live on stage or something like that they were having a lot of success with that before the pandemic, and the lack of actual social contact we've been having because of the pandemic definitely, there's going to be a lot of people wanting to be in crowds and crowded rooms once hopefully this is all past us, and that can be a sort of business model of its own. I mean, you can think back to like the sort of Lincoln Douglas debates, or like people who would like give a address at Cooper Union or something. That was like a huge event before there were any other ways to hear people's voices and stuff like that. So who knows? I guess it's possible. Okay, we've gone a little over an hour. Should we? Anything else you want to add, or should we?
I should probably quit while I'm ahead.
Yeah.
I guess I would say, I'm excited about the podcast. So really, to answer your first question, when I am, of course, going to keep writing. And I mean, this is a little tongue in cheek. I can't keep myself from having an opinion. I am just going to try. I am going to stay away from the zeitgeisty, the big high concept think piece.
Yeah.
And I might encourage others to do the same.
Yeah, I as the crisis of the Trump presidency comes to its end, and as the crisis of the pandemic hopefully comes to its end, I hope to sort of disconnect from feeling like I need to know what's happening every second as well. And maybe, I just feel like like Trump amped up the craziness of everything in America by like 10 times, and once boring Sleepy Joe is in there, hopefully like the pace will just kind of naturally slow, because it's not like something crazy is going to happen. The chance of something crazy happening at every moment is going to go down a lot. So I guess that's kind of my hope. Okay, so we'll include the link to your podcast. So can you say the name of it again?
It's called The Unspeakable, and it's every week. It's been on a little hiatus the last month or so, but it's coming back the beginning of January. And it drops on Mondays, and just free-ranging, interesting conversations with smart people. So
okay, so check that out. And of course, this itself is a podcast, and people can subscribe to it wherever podcasts, whatever you get your podcasts, and rate and review it and all that other stuff. So Meghan, thank you for coming on, especially at such short notice, and talking about this.
Yeah, no, this was a great thing to do on the snow day. So
right, and I think we talked more about you deciding you wanted to talk less than we both anticipated. So I'm happy about that.
Off to a great start.
Okay, so thank you, Meghan. Thanks to our viewers and listeners.
Okay,
and we'll see you next time.
Bye.